Well, anybody who saw that coming probably was not right. And, well, we get the fun of talking about it here. Terps lose to Washington 24-20 after a fourth quarter collapse. Jordan and I talk about game day at CQ, what went wrong in the fourth quarter, but also what went right in the first three quarters and why we have some optimism going forward for this Maryland football team. Let's have a podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Viener X. Viener X is Maryland made, started in Rockville more than 30 years ago, and just like you, has grown up supporting the Terps. Viener X believes in teamwork, preparation, and showing up every day. Values that make winning teams great, and values that help Viener X drive success in your business. Viener X is focused on winning, helping businesses succeed with enterprise technology management. That's why Viener X proudly supports Maryland sports. Viener X, enterprise technology, human first. Well, Jordan, Washington 24, Maryland 20, the final last night from CQ Stadium. I'm, at this point, just at a loss for words. I gave it last night to, try and compile some thoughts. I have a lot of them, but ultimately it's just another loss in seemingly what's a yearly Maryland football tradition of one of these games where the hype's there, it all comes together, and then, you fall flat on your face.
Well, I will actually say, Mason, I don't know if I necessarily agree with you. Last week, I made the point of saying, here we are again. We've been in this spot before as Maryland fans. And that is true. However, I don't think that necessarily played out the same way it's played out before. And I think there's a lot of facets to that. And I think primarily, maybe the biggest one, is that Washington was not Penn State or Ohio State or Michigan or Oregon or like any of these big powerhouse programs. Washington, very good in their own right, but they were a comparable team in terms of talent, at least it seems like. And Maryland, really was in the driver's seat for 3/4 of this game.
But is it no different? And I hate to harp on the past, but it's no different than Purdue a couple years back, Illinois the following year, Northwestern the year after that, or Northwestern that same season as the Illinois loss, of these teams that are on our level that you just need to beat. It's simple.
Maybe.
Some of those were in front of crowds the same size, mainly that Purdue game. But you have a shot and you falter. And this one was you had the game in the bag and you falter. And it's similar to everybody memeing on Penn State last week.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities there. And that's a good comparison to make. It really is. Mason's referring to the Penn State Oregon game last week, not the game that we'll talk about this week later on.
Oh, well, we have our share of those too.
Yeah, we do. We certainly do. But the point remains, yeah, that was a tough one. That was one of the toughest ones I think we've had as Maryland fans, at least in some time. Mason, we got a little bit ahead of ourselves here. The game itself, I don't know. For the first 3/4, honestly, I had a bit of an odd feel to me. Like, it felt like, yeah, we were winning the game by a ton, but it didn't feel like we really had the game in our grasp in the way you should when you're winning in the way we were.
Yeah, I disagree with that. Look, we talked about it on the show. I talked about it on the radio this last week. If you could get pressure and contain the pocket, you're going to beat a team that has one elite wide receiver and a quarterback who can make plays when you allow him to. But when you keep him in the pocket, you can control the game. And look, I've gone back and I've looked at some of the game. Talk about the refs in a minute. I got a lot of thoughts around that. When Sidney Stewart was in the game, the Terps were able to do that. Between Zahir and Sidney Stewart, they were getting pressure every play. The guys at the middle started to push the pocket, but also keep the contained. Trey Reddick played excellent at inside linebacker, but let's face it, there's a reason why Trey Reddick really couldn't stay on the field last year as an edge rusher, and it's because his game caters to being an inside linebacker more than it is to being an edge rusher. But due to D.D. Holmes' poor decision-making, which I'm sure was not exclusive to D.D. Holmes, but, you make choices like that in life, you're going to have to live with the consequences. And Nasir Taylor's injury, the depth just isn't there. Neo Avery just still doesn't really look like he's the Neo Avery that Maryland recruited. He still doesn't look like he's at 100%. They really didn't give him that many reps there. and the defensive backfield faltered. The zone coverages broke down late in those plays. The pressure wasn't there, and look, we couldn't make the sacks either. Levin Scruggs, Messiah Delhomme, they had him. Trey Reddick had him once. Couldn't bring him down. And it just felt like every time we got to the 3rd and long or whatever, it looked like last year. Just could not make a play. Could not find a way to help ourselves win the game.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And, there was you could say the show before the show this week as Wade, myself, and Mason made the long slog from College Park back to Montgomery County. We discussed, and at some point in the car ride home, it felt like we talked about every position group. And this is one of those collapses as we get into the anatomy of this collapse that it felt like everybody had a role to play. There was no one who escaped blame as the game fell apart, which unfortunately includes Malik Washington in this case. I mean, he missed some throws down the line that really hurt the team. I'm not going to put this on him by any stretch, but it goes to show that everybody just seemed to fall apart at once, Mason, and that's a really tough situation to live with in the locker room after the game, but also may help us down the line because it's not like any one player can say, hey, I did my job.
Yeah, I think that is key when you look at this, that it won't be viewed that way inside the building, but I'm not even going to make any kind of gestures or statements towards that because, frankly, year after year, I have no idea how these things are handled inside that building. As much knowledge as I've gathered, as many of these coaches that you talk to, we've not really reacted well to this moment. We have not found a way to overcome going into the next week and change the narrative, and that's the opportunity and somewhat the joy of it or the challenge of it. If you're a coach, is like how can we continue to change, to flip the script, as they like to say. They were able to do that at Wisconsin and kind of change a lot of people's opinion. They're going to have another opportunity to do that next week against Nebraska. But looking at this, I mean, I thought that the play calling really didn't give us an opportunity to win. I thought the calls in the first half, at the end of the half, weren't when you needed to finish, right? And last week, I felt like, or 2 weeks ago, Wisconsin, I felt like we left the door open. And they couldn't take it. They weren't going to take it. You left the door open again. And massive credit to Coach Fish. Massive credit to the play calling. They continued to be aggressive. They kicked that field goal, which a lot of people thought that was kind of it. Like you're going down 20-3. But clearly they saw opportunity if they continue to challenge us with Sidney Stewart out of the game and knowing the personnel and having been able to kind of adjust throughout the game. And our adjustment seemed to be to try and throw the ball 49 times in this football game. I don't understand it. I thought that after it started from the beginning of the game, the interception by Jalen Husky, and then I didn't like the play calling. You want to get downhill and establish yourself as the dominant team. I felt like the offensive line did that, but then you took away the run, and they cannot be one-dimensional. The receivers are not good enough for us to be one-dimensional. The running backs are not great, but we got to run the ball to make the other team think you can run the ball and will run the ball. But 16 rush attempts from running backs against 49 pass attempts is not where this team needs to be. It's not where the talent is on it. And frankly, it's just bad play calling and losing a feel for the game. Kind of to your point, it was we weren't really dominating the game, but the score was dominant, and just something came undone somewhere, and we had no response.
Yeah, no, that is a good way to put it. Like, I think a key turning point in this game as we got into the fourth quarter was, and it's a shame that we aren't even talking about the rest of the game because it doesn't even matter. Like, at the end of the day, the fourth quarter is all that really mattered. But to me, at least, Mason, the turning point in this game really was after they kicked that field goal and Washington was down 20-3. Maryland, in the next 2 drives, ran to mine 6 plays and just had nothing on offense. And it just felt everywhere. The receivers weren't getting separation, which was a huge factor throughout the entire game, as you and Wayne on the field saw up close. The pass protection fell apart. They wouldn't run the ball. I don't know if it would have been effective if they did, but the fact of the matter is they didn't. Malik missed some of the throws. He really had trouble keeping the ball down in the fourth quarter, Mason. I don't know if you had any better insight to what was going on there, but that was unfortunately a huge factor. He had Octavian Smith for a corner route that would have gotten 20, 25 yards that he just slowed the ball on.
Yeah, I think that play, I don't like pointing to that play and saying that he missed. We're talking about a late breaking route, trying to find a guy right on the edge of the sideline. He throws it over his head. Let's be real, Jordan. You already hit the nail on the head. We can't get separation. The guy throws darts, and yeah, he missed. And I felt like after he missed for the interception, which in my opinion is on Farouk, like you got to stick a hand out there and bat that ball down. I mean, it's behind him, but he's not even looking. His head doesn't come around to look for the ball at all. That was what was open. The seam routes over the middle. You're playing against a team that's rolling a two deep safety look, taking away the outside edges against you. The plays over the middle, which considering that our tight end seems to be the best pass catcher we have that's at this level, and punch, so two guys that generally are on your inside, you got to throw that ball and drive it down the middle, but we're facing pressure up the middle. We're not running the ball to make anybody back off or think they can over pursue. And yes, he missed. He was not excellent. He was very good. In the end, he delivered the ball that probably wins us the game, and we can't catch it.
Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. The point being, in that stretch, we probably burned a minute total off the clock. We had no control of the ball, and the defense never got the chance to recover, which I think was also huge in this, so that they just couldn't stay off the field for a minute and get it back together. And when you're running against a quarterback that was as mobile and agile as Washington's was, you need the time to recover. Your pass rushers need some time to rejuice, especially when the pass rushers are as thin as they already are.
Yeah, nothing was good. And in some ways, to that point, the way we're calling the game, I would have really loved to see us run the ball 3 times, take all. Basically, what you can take is 55 seconds between plays. The play clock's 40 seconds, doesn't really start immediately. Maybe it's 45 seconds. You can find a way to eke off the clock. That's overall. And with these absurd media timeouts that are every 5 seconds, you probably could have found a way to, if you went 3 and out, you could have found a way to give yourself a 4 to 6 minute break.
Yeah, you could have, and that would have really been beneficial.
And I think that kind of changes the game. But you're looking at a guy in Pep Hamilton who loves running the ball. I'm so incensed by the fact that Mike Loxley's been coaching offense in football his entire career. Pep's been coaching offense in football his entire career. Ted has been coaching defense in football his entire career. Where is the breakdown that says we're just going to completely abandon one half of the game? They weren't running the ball horribly, especially when they were running the ball up the middle. Yet, you just find a way to leave that part of the game out. You become one-dimensional, tunnel-visioned, and short-sighted, and then long-term you feel the repercussions for it. Whether they felt like they could get a first down running the ball or not, you got to try. You only know when you try. And we got conservative, and it's weird to say a team got conservative and they run the ball 2 times after the first drive, but I just felt like the 360 or the 180 of it was crazy. The first drive of the third quarter was possibly Pep Hamilton's best called series of the season. And then after that, it just felt like something just broke. And we just weren't able to make plays. And we need a guy who can change the game. And we don't have our Stephon Diggs, our DJ Moore, your Ty Feltons, your Caden Prathers right now. And you can clearly see it's a wound right now for this football team.
Well, we'll break into the bigger picture here in a minute, Mason, but let's go around the Big Ten. And an interesting day around this conference, and we'll get to the big one in a minute, but first off, in a bit of a concerning game in Ann Arbor, Michigan only defeats Wisconsin by 24-10. Mason, the Michigan Wolverines, I'm going to be honest, I don't think they should be ranked at this point. They are not shown to be a top 25 team.
Yeah, but they will be because, they find ways to win, something that we can learn from. And I think this team, when you look at Michigan, their running game is really something good, and their backfield is really talented. Donovan McCulley is the kind of guy that we could use right now, playing wide receiver. But look, it's a young quarterback. He's learning on the job. And credit to Luke Fickell's team, right? They could have completely folded and lost this game by 50, and I don't think anybody would have been surprised if he didn't have a job today. but they didn't. Third string quarterback came in. He looked good at the end of the Maryland game. He gave them opportunities, but they're another team that in a lot of ways, not that they mirror us because they have a different set of problems, but offensively they have the same kind of stall rate of they're able to get some things going and then there's nothing there. And they can't block, which is so bizarre for a Wisconsin football team to say that about. Can't see the Badgers finding a way to 6 wins. Really can't see a way that Luke Fickell still has his job come this time next year.
I would agree with you. Illinois beats Purdue in a game that was closer than many thought. Mason 43-27.
Yeah, I mean, Luke Altmaier is a excellent college quarterback. I don't really see the next level talent there, but he continues to make plays for the Illini. Things are bad for Purdue right now. They do not have a Big Ten level team. I know a lot of people haven't put them in that bottom tier of the league. I am. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't win a league game this season. They might have a couple shots. They might get close a few times, but it's ugly. It looked like they were going to get going the right direction last year, and it did not happen at all. And this year is, kind of step 2 in the rebuild process.
Maybe the best game of the weekend in the conference, certainly a high-scoring one. Nebraska beats Michigan State in an absolute point showcase, 38-27.
Yeah, Michigan State is starting to elude me on actually how to figure out what's going on there. They can score, but they don't have a defense. It's become really apparent between the USC game and the game against Nebraska. Dylan Raiola's starting to look good. I'm still not a buyer of his stock going into next week. I think that we're going to have a lot of opportunities to create some turnovers, and we're just going to need to take advantage of them. Sparty ultimately can't. He kept it close for a while, but the black shirts came through big for Nebraska, and they were able to get that home victory, which is, really important for them as they're trying, I guess, still to push into the upper tier of the conference. Not really sure what the thought process is out in Lincoln right now.
Nebraska sits at 4-1. We'll break that game down later in the week. Ohio State houses Minnesota 42-3. I don't think there's much to say on that one, Mason.
Hey, there is something to say, though. The Buckeyes have found themselves a quarterback in the last 6 quarters of play, and he was on fire last night. Minnesota, they thought they had themselves a great freshman quarterback, but it's just the talent level is not there for PJ Fleck. They're going to find a way to get to a bowl, which seems to be the floor that he's established, which is really good for them as a program. But these upper tier games, they're just not recruiting to really compete in them. And it just shows time and time again when they don't have 18 seniors starting, they're just not really that competitive against specifically Ohio State, but really the upper tier of this league.
And last and certainly not least, Mason, and maybe the most shocking game of the season at any conference, UCLA, who was flailing with a new head coach, defeats Penn State 42-37 on CBS. Mason, we were watching this game at the Maryland game. Just an absolutely shocking result.
Yeah, I never feel bad for Penn State, but I do feel bad for Denai Dennis Sutton, who really felt like he was trying to will his team to victory in this. This game potentially had the worst play call that I've witnessed this year in college football. The 4th down play from Penn State, where Drew Aller attempted to run the ball out of the shotgun inside the 15-yard line, when you have Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, and you live off of like that power T, double tight end, extra offensive lineman run, was beyond stupid from James Franklin's staff. That's all I have to say. Happy to see Penn State lose. Disappointed. I'm just disappointed when talent is misused that much in football. But UCLA, I mean, Nico finally looked like the guy that they paid for. And if they can play like that, they can win some games. It's unbelievable to see Penn State fold like that, because they've been in that spot many of times, as have many of those top 10 teams that drop a tight game where you don't come out on the road right. You get down a couple points, but you find your way back and you come out with a win. UCLA just had it. I mean, congratulations to that guy that's calling plays there, who was a quarterback about 10 years ago for UCLA, who's now taken over as the offensive coordinator. I was really, really happy to see that. It's such a great story of college football, and it just shows. That's why even in this era where guys are asking a red shirt and all that stuff, the 22 guys that start between offense and defense, and ultimately like the 30 5 guys roughly that really play the bulk of the snaps, have the ability any Saturday to come out on top, to win teams games, and to show that good effort and good preparation can find the way to victory.
Yeah, there's something to be said, Mason, about that one because, I mean, I don't have a problem talking about this longer. It takes us away from our current situation in College Park. UCLA, man, just way to stick with it and fight, to your point. They did not give up on the season, and the season's not over for them, if we're being honest. I mean, they have a fairly easy schedule the rest of the way. They can still lose 2 more games. I'm not going to say they're bowl eligible, but they can make it. And it's hard not to call it a program saver for UCLA because, my gosh, they were the worst team in college football up to this point. And to beat a top 10 team where it just looked over for you to that degree is something that you just don't see very often. It's a huge boon for their program. And for Penn State and James Franklin, Mason, I mean, you don't want to be dramatic, but you've seen this take a lot, and I tend to agree. It might be over for him. It really might be.
It certainly looks that way right now. And it certainly kind of, if you've looked at kind of their fan sentiment from, I would almost say, the Notre Dame playoff loss last year through now, it would certainly seem to be heading that way. It's one of those teams, a lot like some of the SEC programs. I don't know what they're going to find that's better. And at some point, I guess you have to try. But you're talking about a team that was in the playoff semifinal last year. Take the name and the face off the opponent kind of thing. Look at the resume over the last 10 years and what he's been able to accomplish. What would tell you that they can really accomplish more than that? They're in the picture year in, year out. They can't win the game. And yeah, eventually frustration will build and somebody will get fired. I don't really think that that's something you do right now. You've lost 2 games in conference. The way the top 10, top 12 shaking out, that's going to define who's in that playoff. You could really say it's an outside shot, but they still have a shot. So you can't really do anything crazy enough. The wheels come off the bus with all the money that's been put in between NIL, like keeping Drew Aller, and he has not looked good. You would think that the end is near, it's within reach, but I wouldn't jump to that conclusion yet. The team needs to find their identity, get back to doing what they do well, which is run the football. But ultimately, roster construction in the portal destroys teams that like to do things like run the ball 50 times a game because you cannot build an offensive line when guys jump ship all the time. And that's set in for teams like Wisconsin and for teams like Penn State and in some ways for teams like Minnesota. The landscape changing has just damaged their identity in the way they build their team with depth up front on both sides of the ball. Everybody wants to play right now, and it's like Bo Peribula, who left, we know, when they probably thought they were going to win the championship last year. Guys need to jump ship because they feel that pressure that they need to get on the field somewhere. And for some of these teams, that is just, it creates a huge gap. And Penn State and Wisconsin are 2 examples of that.
Yeah, no, those are some fair points. And to your point about running the ball and building offensive line culture, it's taken a huge shot in the portal because offensive linemen are so valuable in the portal. One thing to note as we talk about the James Franklin situation, which I'm sure will be evolved over the season, is you have to remember where Penn State was when he got there. I mean, it took him a while to get the ship started again. Penn State's had a really solid, what do you want to say, 10 years or so, but the first couple of years he was there, I mean, Mason, they were 6-6, 7-5. They were in a really bad spot when he got there, and he's done a good job turning it around. That said, it was fun to see Penn State lose yesterday. It was a nice reprieve from our disaster. And Mason, a great segue.
Well, at one point, I think it really looked great. They're putting it up on the scoreboard. People are cheering. We're winning by a lot. They're losing to a team that's terrible. But just couldn't find a way to finish it. You're going to hear the same thing from me if you're still with us on this podcast. We just could not find a way to finish. And like Jordan said, it was on everybody.
Well, something you mentioned as we talk about, we zoom out a little bit here, Mason, and I want to address something that's being talked about a lot in the fan base. You mentioned with James Franklin and Penn State, realistically, what are you going to find that's better? I want to posit the same thing to all the Maryland fans that want to fire Mike Loxley, because I really do mean this. And I played this game with myself a little bit yesterday. How much better do you really think you can be? Because I'm not trying to be negative here, but look, guys, this is not a powerhouse. We are bragging about our crowd and talking of our sellout here. The game was not sold out. Okay, and Maryland football, for all the complaining people do, has been really solid the last 5 years. It's not like this team has sucked, exception of last year. Like, we have been 7, 8, or 8 wins before that. Anybody's complaining the team's not good enough needs a slap in the face, because this team has been pretty solid. And no, we have not been great in Big Ten play, but we're in the Big Ten, and we're Maryland. And I think expectations and program identity for this fan base is a huge delusion that we need to address. I'm not saying things are good here, and the loss yesterday sucked, but chill on firing locks. And I really do mean that, Mason. I know you disagree with me, but I think we are deluding ourselves on how much better we can be.
I don't disagree with you at all, actually. I think the trajectory of this program is extremely positive right now. I think when you look at the roster and what they're building, that to say that the coach should be fired right now is to not know what you're talking about. Yeah, they have not been able to win that game. Yes, he's 0-10 off of bye weeks. Yes, there are issues here. But if you look at the talent that is building right now on this football team, there is nothing that should really even have you down today. I'm upset that we lost this game. I was about ready to lose my mind yesterday in the stadium and on the post-game show, for those of you that watch it. There are pieces of that were edited out. Because I didn't think they were really appropriate, but it's how I felt at that moment. You know, it's an instant take show. This team is made of true freshmen and portal pieces and is going to, barring absolute disaster, compete in every single game left on the schedule. They have established elite edge rushers through recruiting and scouting players. They've patched the middle of the defensive line with one guy who's got more than 1 year to play here and another guy who's a grad transfer going out, and they're backfilling that, again, with young, talented football players. They've addressed a lot of what's needed in the secondary, and then you look at the offensive side of the ball. We have a quarterback who, yeah, he might have not played his best game yesterday, but when it came down to it, he threw an NFL-level pass to a wide receiver who needs to make a play and bring that ball in. He did not make huge mistakes in this game. The future of this football team is extremely bright. They need to find, and they will find, because believe me, Mike Locksley will identify skill talent players and bring them onto this team. Some help a wide receiver, some help the tight end that can block. Maybe Dorian Fleming's a wide receiver. I don't know what you need to do there. And a young offensive line and offensive core that will come in and fill gaps. And hey, they have the number one player in the class committed for next year. If you're not excited about that, when it comes down to something that Jordan said, and I hate hearing it because, look, this program has won a lot of games. They've played a lot of big games in the history of college football. But the talent that is coming into this program that I firmly believe will stay committed, and the talent that is on this roster right now that is young and is consistently getting better week in and week out to this point, the only thing that can tear us down right now is, one, if we collapse as a fan base, and two, if the locker room shatters like it did last year. And I won't bet on that locker room shattering. If you listen to what Malik said, he mentioned a Bible verse from Jeremiah at the end of his press conference. That is exactly, if that's something that unites this team, I'm all for it. And that is exactly kind of the thought process that needs to be utilized right now inside that locker room. It is the challenges and how you come together and respond to them. And sometimes the plan, whether it's something that you didn't execute or you believe in something that a higher power got in the way of, sometimes things happen for a reason, and that's the way to look at this. How can you get better from this moment? How can these guys learn overall that things that happen off the field cannot detriment the greater good of all? And how you can overcome when things don't go your way from the reffing perspective, from the injury perspective. A lot of things went wrong for us, and ultimately we were not able to come together and make it happen for ourselves, and the other team didn't give it to us. But how do you respond to that, and how do you kind of move on to that? That's the story. That's the coaching that's needed in there, and he is the leader that I believe in will provide the ability for us to move forward past this, going into a game that is 100% winnable on our field in 6 days from now.
I think that was very well said, Mason. And it also segues into something that I've been sitting on for this podcast. So Mason and Wayne, for those who don't know, They're sitting up in our seats in 206. Come say hi if you want to, guys. But we're sitting up there. Connie and myself leave and go to the parking lot. Mason and Wayne go down and tape the show. And as we're walking out here, Connie and I got some great snippets of fans leaving the building. And there are actually points I want to talk about because a lot of them, I felt like I got a great sampling of what it felt like to be a fan after that game. And this was also my first game in College Park since moving back into the area. So that was kind of special for me, which was a better game, but Maryland football. There was a woman in front of us who, and if you're listening, if any of the people I talk about here are listening, hi, feel free to shoot us a DM on Twitter. But the woman in front of us is talking about how this just sucks, and it sucks being a Maryland football fan, and why did I come out to the game, and why do I support this team, and it's just painful all the time. And she compared it to the Buffalo Bills, which I thought was kind of funny. And yeah, if you're a fan, yesterday, today, yeah, it does suck, and some of us were wondering why we chose to be Maryland fans, myself included, because it really was one of those, like, just gut-wrenching, punch-in-the-face losses, Mason, and I'm sure you felt the same way.
I think I've said it multiple times.
Yeah, it was a tough one. It really was. And then we kept walking, and someone else starts talking about how, and this was actually a very wise point by whoever this fan was. It was a middle-aged gentleman who was talking about how, this year, this game didn't become this year or this game until it did become this year, this game. And that goes back to a point I was making in the podcast, I think maybe 1 or 2 episodes ago, where before the season, people were talking about, the goal is 6 wins. The goal is 5 wins. You just don't want to suck this year. This team's all freshmen. It's all newcomers. It's all a lot of unknown portal pieces, as you already said, Mason. And that's a valid point, I really do think. And I'm not going to excuse what happened yesterday. What happened yesterday was unexcusable. It was horrible. It was an excruciatingly painful experience to be sitting in CQ Stadium during the fourth quarter. And I told Wayne this, and he countered, but I still think this is somewhat true. As far as single quarters of Maryland football went, that was among the worst I've ever seen. And I know we've had some disastrous first, second quarters against Penn State, Iowa, Ohio State, whatever else you want to throw out there. But I mean, that game was in the bag. We had it. We were going to be ranked next week. Like we were going somewhere, and then we just weren't. And that really did suck. But to this guy's point, no, this season was not significant, really. This game wasn't a big game until we made it a big game. We as fans, the team, we got to that point where, oh my gosh, this team's overachieving. These freshmen are really good. These portal pieces are working. And until the fourth quarter, that was all true. And I'm not going to excuse anything that happened, but you can't dismiss that. There is credit to be had there. And the fact that this fans are upset as they are is a good thing because it means we've made progress from where we were at the start of the season.
And they are still that good. And that's something that I want everybody that's listening to understand. These freshmen are that good. They showed what they can do. They took a team that had, whether he came from a junior college and had to stop here, they made Maximus McCree look like he basically wasn't there as a left tackle. Same thing on the right side of it. They are that good. And they will come back next week and be that good. Some of these guys are absolute dogs. Those guys, they don't quit. They see the upside. I am very interested in the mentality of us coming out that week. And to the fans, Jordan, to your point, and I heard a lot of it walking out or walking down and walking around the stadium, is come out and support the team. Like, you can't tell me that yesterday was not fun. There were 300 people at the Old Line tailgate. Shout out Ben Page. I mean, he puts on an amazing show every week. He does just a great, great thing for Maryland fans that maybe don't have a place to tailgate or the community that he's created. I mean, another friend of ours and a friend of our show had 500 people at his tailgate. They had to move it out of the parking lot. You can't tell me you didn't have a good time when you came out. You can't tell me that it's not an affordable experience to go out to the game there. The one thing that I wish did not happen was the sun wasn't shining hard and it wasn't like 90 degrees sitting on the one side of the stadium, but you can't control everything. For the fans, and I talked to Joe LeBou also about this, is the game day experience has improved. The one thing that I will never understand is like why we don't play Rock and Roll Part 2 every time we make a big play. I don't get it. I feel like that's the only thing that's lacking. It's like we don't have things that unite us as a fan base. We don't have people that get up off their ass and cheer for our team, which I don't understand. Like, you're at a game. We're not at like a wine festival on a Saturday. Could you get up and like make some noise? I mean, one half of the stadium was, but I feel like where we sit, I don't want to stand up in the first row of it because then I'm blocking the other 250 people sitting behind me. And those of you that know me, you really can't see over me. I'm too tall for that. But it's just like I don't get. And then like between Seven Nation Army and Rock and Roll Part 2, I don't want to hear like, and I love them, but like the I'm the biggest, the largest song when we're trying to hype a stadium up of people that don't listen to modern rap music. Like, it just doesn't happen. But I just, that's the only thing I have to say about the game day. But those of you that came out that don't come out to the games, they are entertaining. They are affordable. There is a good product on the field. There's a lot to be excited about here. And look, like I've said every other show, and I'll leave it with this, Jordan. This is the last thing I have to say. I'm excited to watch Malik Washington play next week. I'm excited to watch Sidney Stewart play next week. I'm excited to watch Zahir Mathis play next week. And frankly, I'm excited to see if Mike Locksley has made the progress that he says he's made and will come back and have this team ready to go and ready to play some football against a good team next week and show everybody that this wasn't good. It wasn't good by any stretch of the imagination. We had it in the bag and we botched it, but we are not the same old team that's just going to fold the same way. And that's a big change to make, whatever it is, 9 years into your or 7 years into your career here. But I can believe in these coordinators. I can believe in these guys. They're not going to let this slip away. They're not going to let this go down the tubes, and they're going to come back next week and be ready to go and punch somebody in the face.
I really hope you're right, Mason. And look, if we were wrong, we both got some crow to eat next week, but I'm willing to take that chance on this team. And look, my reputation among this podcast for long-time listeners, and deservedly so, and I'll fully admit it too, is I'm a pessimistic Maryland fan. This team's never given me a reason to believe in them for real. That said, and I still maintain this from last week, I do believe this year is different. I'm buying the sauce this year. And look, if I'm wrong, I'll own it. And I'll say, yeah, I should have stuck to my guns and stayed negative, but I want to believe things are better. And I think Malik, to your point, Mason, and these freshmen that are coming here and buying in and like believing each other more than anything else will get us out of this. We'll see what happens with D.D. Holmes. If he's back next week, that's great. Sidney Stewart will be back on the field. I do have to say, folks, that was targeting, just by rule. I don't. If you don't like the rule, that's one thing, but that by rule was a foul.
Hold on, I gotta go back over something because I said I was going to talk about it. I don't like talking about it. A lot like my man Torrey Smith said on Twitter. I don't like blaming things on refs. I believe this was his quote. I never really talk about the refs, but man, these guys are trash. That's about all that needs to be said. And look, I've said this multiple times again. It doesn't matter whether you're coaching 8-year-olds on Sundays at a rec park or you're coaching NFL players. If your team has established a reputation for themselves of not acting correctly during the game, breaking the rules, talking trash, etc., being disrespectful, not saying that we're doing those things. I do know from watching the game on the field, we do talk a lot of trash. That is, you can see it on TV, you can see it on the field.
Hey, DBs everywhere talk trash, though.
It's not the DB. We talk a lot of trash. I'll put it lightly that way. You will identify yourselves as people that are honed to get flags. I have coached a high school lacrosse team that has made themselves this reputation from the same kind of stuff that Maryland does. And I will say it took years to change that. I have seen a lot of positive changes in this manner from Maryland. But when I say years, I mean it took years. And certain reffing crews, they stay the same. Because you know what? Because of all of these lovely parents across athletics and the coaches that like to lose their minds and the fans that love to harass and say not boo, but say ridiculous things to refs when they're doing things like walking off a basketball court. Nobody wants to referee games anymore. So the same guys will get on your games. There's not abundance of referees out there. They're the same crews, and they have been for years. And we've established ourselves, like Mike Locksley said in the press conference, finally, I guess, as a team that is pinned as a team you may want to watch things like the unsportsmanlike conduct and late hits on and things like that. We've identified ourselves as those people, and we're going to pay for that. Fair or not, I don't know what to say, but we've made that case for ourselves, and we have to live with it. Now, on the other hand, how these referees don't know what holding is when the offensive linemen are tackling the defensive players, I don't know. That's absurd. That is ridiculous. They're not going to call it every play. I don't care. They're committing the foul every play. You got to call it every play. Call it 3 plays in a row, but you'll stop doing it. As somebody who's refereed games, Jordan, I know you've refereed games as well. Like, yep. I, for one, have always taken the position of, like, if you're holding the guy and you're tackling him to the ground, I'm throwing the flag. I'm doing it. I don't care how many times it is. You're stopping the play by committing a foul in the game's rule book. Like, that is a penalty. The seatbelt thing, I have no idea what else went on there. Something else had to go on there. Like, you could say the referee had him targeted for it. He had warned Dante Joyner multiple times in the game at that point. Maybe that was just the last straw. I don't know. But it was bogus in some ways. I agree with you on the Sidney Stewart foul. I really didn't want to, but that is the letter of the law when it comes to that rule. That is the one thing I feel like at this point is officiated, honestly, very clearly in college football at this point. Is a specific part off a radius of a helmet with forcible contact and leading with it. You watch that play, I don't know what else he's supposed to do. Those of you who are going to say that, that's the letter of the law in the sport, and they're going to call it. Some of these things, though, the Bryce McPherson one, absurd. That is a 15-yard penalty by the letter of the law. Call the damn penalty. That's all I have to say. You can't make yourself a target of refereeing. We've managed to do that. Were some of those calls atrocious? Yes. Do we get hosed? I believe so. That's all I got to say.
I did not peg the referee rant as the longest one for the Mason for the day, but it goes to show what I know out here. That's kind of it for me, too. Look, folks, that was a really tough one. That was among the toughest I've seen as a Maryland fan. And I've been watching this a long time. Not as long as some of you, but a long time. That said, look, world's on fire right now. We'll be fine. At least I hope so. We'll talk about Nebraska later in the week. I'm not sure how I feel about next week as far as winning the game, but I believe we will not collapse. And look, let's just get back out there and do our work. Do not give up on this team. And by God, if I hear any of you complain about crowd attendance next week and don't show up to the game, we're going to have words. I will find you and talk to you because that's not how we're operating this as a program. If you want more of this program, you need to put in more yourself, fans, because do not give up after one very bad, but one game.
Yeah, I agree with that. Those of you who do come out to the games, though, you do have a right to complain. I'll put it that way, too. I think that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Make sure to give us a thumbs up where you can. Drop us a review if you feel inclined to after this. As always, subscribe to us where you can. We'll be back here midweek and preview Nebraska going into next week. And as always, go Terps.